Hello and welcome to the Reigns of Podcastamere, the new PennLive's new and fantastic. I think we can say fantastic, can't we?
It's safe to say fantastic.
I think it's going to be pretty fantastic.
Yeah.
This is our new fantastic podcast devoted entirely to the HBO show Game of Thrones. My name is Chris Mautner. I'm the community engagement lead for PennLive. Over to my right, wherever that might be, you can visualize where my right might be, but it
may or may not be on the right of Chris Mautner.
You'll never know.
You will never know, but I am Becky Jones. I am the web producer at PennLive.
And sitting across from me is our Game of Thrones expert, Sean Adams. Say hello, Sean.
Hello, expert. Am I the expert?
I think as far as you are our official Game of Thrones reporter.
I am the senior Westeros correspondent for
Absolutely.
PennLive as our entertainment reporter who covers the
That's on your
series.
business card.
And that's a hard job.
Yeah.
That's a difficult job to have.
A lot of turnover. A lot of dead reporters.
So we're doing the show because season 5 of Game of Thrones is starting.
Is it?
And we're
Is it
all.
really?
Woo!
I don't know. I heard that somewhere.
I read it on the internet.
Yeah. Okay. Well, then it must be true.
Right.
Everything we hear on the internet is true, and we thought it might be fun to do a little show since we've all been watching it and are pretty big fans of this show.
Well, Sean said a good point the other day, which is that these are the conversations we've been having Monday mornings anyway. So now we're just recording it and trying to be maybe a little funnier for you guys. So we'll see.
It's just slightly funnier.
I'll laugh right.
We're already pretty hilarious.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think we are. Well, let's
And humble.
Do we want to? Do we want to talk a little bit about how we became Game of Thrones fans? Like, I know for me, like I came to the show late. I actually only just started watching it. I haven't read the books.
You were reluctant.
I was reluctant. I was because dragons,
believe
fantasy,
it.
bah, humbug.
Yeah.
Who needs that? I like real boring movies about dry subjects like toast.
Give me some Frenchmen talking over coffee.
Yeah, if there's
about
not
their dead
subtitles, I'm
children.
not interested. But there are subtitles in Game of
Sometimes, yeah.
Thrones, which maybe so I forgave it.
Okay.
But Becky, like, how long did you read the books first or watch the show?
Started I think I watched one episode of the show, and then I realized I had to read the books. And so I pretty much, on one vacation to my aunt's cabin in Tennessee, I read all 5 books in about a month. And
That's a lot. They're large.
that's
Those are
a
investments.
little bit of an exaggeration. I probably read 3 of the books in that time, but that's still a feat. But I couldn't put them down, and I was really surprised because I've never really been that dedicated to a book series before. Even Lord of the Rings I sort of was, but I was a kid, So after that, I just got really invested in the show because that's sort of all I had left. There's no books coming out recently, so
Yeah.
we're hoping.
Maybe.
Yeah, I started reading the books. A friend of mine named Jeremy came to town, and he was like, "Hey, you guys got to read this book." And some of my other friends started reading it, and I was also a little reluctant. Like, I'm not a huge I like fantasy; it's all right, but I'm not super into reading. Oh, this is going to be 12 novels of names with umlauts and apostrophes in them. But yeah, I got into it. And
I go to heavy metal festivals for those sorts of things.
And I started reading it, and I was a little turned off by the first book at the beginning because I thought the villains were so two-dimensional, which is so ironic because the deeper you go in the books,
Right.
you start seeing other characters' perspectives, and you see things from their point of view, and suddenly you're on their side, which is something that I was really into. So
Not just the Starks anymore.
right,
Yeah.
Starks,
Ugh, who
please.
needs 'em? Except Arya.
Yeah, Arya can stay. The rest,
the man.
meh. So yeah, I ended up coming to the books at a good time because I only had a brief wait until the 5th one came out because I know fans were waiting like 10 years or something ridiculous. And now also the series is out, so it was a good time to jump in.
Yeah.
Well, let's segue from there. Let's jump over to the new season that's coming up. I know we're all very excited for season 5. I am personally a Twitter. I am shaking.
You're a Twitter.
Pretty much all the time, but I think that's mostly coffee and amphetamines. But
Sure.
But before we get to talking about what we're looking forward to, let's take a look back, as it were. Now, we're not going to, I should note here at this point, now we're not going to recap the entire, all 4 seasons, and we're not going to, we're not going to try and spare you from spoilers. So, if you haven't watched Game of Thrones at this point, I don't even know why you're listening
why
to
are you?
the...
Turn it off.
Turn the show off, walk
This would be
away.
a weird point to jump in.
Just leave.
Yeah.
I think I'll start with season 5 of this series, which is famous for killing off characters.
Brilliant. Who are these people? Who cares?
I'm sure they exist. I'm sure they're very nice, intelligent people who hug puppies.
Jerks.
However, I will say, if you are interested in recapping season 4 all over again, all of my recaps from last year are still on PennLive.com.
Nice plug. Nice.
They're already
plug.
here. They're already on our website.
I approve. Okay, so let's talk about where we were when the very last episode of season 4. There was a lot of cliffhangers, a lot of people kind of left mid-story, as it were. So what's the most compelling storyline that you're eager to find out? Where do we leave off the character you're most interested in whose story was left hanging the most?
For me, it's Tyrion, but I might be biased because I do know some idea of where it's going, but some of the teaser trailers show Tyrion sitting next to Daenerys in Essos.
They imply that the two are sitting next to each other.
Well,
but
sure.
But we should recap too and say Tyrion ended, his story ended on quite a note where
he shot his dad in the gut with an arrow while he was on the toilet. He strangled his ex-lover. It's like a whole situation.
Yeah.
And then hopped on a boat.
turmoil.
Ended up being taken on a boat to heaven knows where is it? Where was
T-Pain.
Okay.
Yeah, so he's definitely on a boat, and it's implied that he is going to Essos, which is the other continent, somewhere on which that continent resides Daenerys and her growing army and dragons and etc.
And let's talk about...
Well, I'm really excited for that because every other time that, if they do meet up, like is implied in the teaser trailer, every time that the show has met up to characters that weren't met up in the book, I've loved it. For instance, oh my gosh, can we please talk about, again, the Brienne and the Hound fight scene? Because that was the greatest thing to ever grace my television.
Yeah, and Becky and I, like we said, we've read the books, so we theoretically know what's going to happen. But they are getting more... I think the showrunners are more confident than ever as the series is progressing to deviate from the books, and when they do, it is so surprising for people who do know the story. They think they know. And yeah, Brienne and the Hound never met in the books. And their meeting in the show was awesome.
That was definitely the high point of the season 4 finale.
I agree.
Certainly from my point. I mean, that battle was pretty, and it left the Hound seemingly dead. And who knows? Although who knows, he could show up again. And
I don't trust anything I don't see on camera.
Exactly.
Absolutely, which is this, yes. And Arya Stark hopping on a boat as well.
Just
Everyone's on a boat, just like T-Pain.
Why not?
T-Pain should show up on House
of...
So I'd say she was the other big, what's going to happen sort of thing. And part of it is they're going to a completely new place. Pretty much everyone else is remaining where they were. Their circumstances have changed. Their circumstances have changed, rather. But they're relatively stable. But those two are theoretically completely without friends, going to a whole new place, which is very exciting.
Well, there are a couple other supporting characters or other characters. I'm very curious to learn what happens to them. The team up of Peter Baelish and Sansa Stark.
Sansa is really in a weird place for us book readers because she's basically caught up with her storyline in the books, and
That's
so anywhere she goes from here is a total surprise for everyone, which is, to me, very exciting. I can't imagine that it'll be anywhere bad.
I'm very curious to see how, because they left off with the suggestion that she might have finally become savvy enough to be able to manipulate Baelish, who is probably one of the great villains of the show.
Yeah.
And weirdly loved, like...
He's my favorite villain, if that counts.
I feel like there's a lot of people who are, rather than like qualifying like favorite villain, there are people who are like rooting for that guy.
No, what? Some men just like to watch the world burn.
And some men just like to watch some men watch the world burn.
Sure. like Peter Baelish.
I think there are some fans who like kind of are shipping those two, which is weird and gross.
Yeah, that's not acceptable.
I much prefer, rather than them being like, hooray, we're on the same team, that Sansa eventually is the player of the Game of Thrones and plays him. And that would be ultimate poetic justice, I think.
For everything she's endured, oh my goodness. And how much of it at his hand, we don't really know.
I mean, let's remember that guy killed her dad, basically.
Right. Yes. Run through a couple other characters and where they left off and other storylines. Of course, we have Jon Snow, who knows nothing.
Who knows nothing.
Except
that Stannis is at his door.
Yes, except Stannis is at his door. There was a brief preview of a scene with Mance I found online, where a sneak preview of him talking to Mance in jail, trying to convince him to surrender or give up something. It's unclear what. It was a very short scene, but certainly there was that evil sorceress had some eyes on Jon Snow at the end of episode 4. Yeah. So.
Well, that's a rough one having Stannis there with him because the Night's Watch takes no part, and now they've got a king hanging out with them. So that's a rough relationship to try to handle, I think.
Yeah. And I think something that they go more in depth in the book, and it's been teased a little bit in the show with Stannis and Melisandre, they are a little obsessed with the idea of blood of kings and like how the blood of kings can do certain magic. And it was kind of glossed over in the series. There was a big moment where she does, Gendry, the blacksmith boy, who was technically the son of a king, they used his blood to do some magic. And so that's something that comes back into play with this. Book readers will know this comes back into play with their story arc. And Mance is technically a king because he is king of the North.
Yep.
So, yeah.
So what's happening?
Don't spoil much for me.
No
I'll be upset.
There's no spoiling.
I'll cry. There'll be tears. Copious tears.
Yeah, I think the wildlings, I found them more interesting in the book. They were, other than Ygritte, who I adored in the series, was
amazing.
Definitely one of the highlights of season 4.
Yes.
And so if they're trying to, in the trailer, they talk about working with the wildlings to fight off the oncoming giant zombie horde of ice zombies and the White Walkers. So, it will be neat to see if they make those characters a little bit more fleshed out and likable. Because last season they were just kind of like, oh, we're from the north and we're going to invade, and it was like, yeah,
that was good. That was good. Can you do that again? Can you do that one more time?
Now the pressure's on. I don't know. There's a lot of bearded dudes with axes. And I'm like, okay, I'd like to know who you are and why you do things.
Yeah, I feel like they really focused on individual wildling characters in the book a lot more.
Yeah.
And the characters are there in the show, but you don't really get to know them.
It's also, it's hard to do comedy in this series sometimes because some of the Walls characters are very funny in the book and just aren't here. And that's might be tone, it might be just cut for time, whatever. You can't make the book into the show, but...
Right.
Well, let's go. Speaking of likable, let's talk about probably what is the least liked storyline, I think, in Game of Thrones, and that's the storyline involving Bran Stark, the magic seer, the magic crippled seer,
and Quaker Oats boy.
Is he a Quaker Oats boy?
He totally looks like him.
I kind of wish you could have led me along there. I would have completely bought that he was the Quaker in like a Quaker Oats commercial as a child.
Look at his haircut.
Now you got me hungry for instant oatmeal.
That's what I had for breakfast.
About as palatable as that storyline.
Sure,
yeah, I don't think that's a storyline that anyone really has any interest in.
But I think I might be the exception. I am interested in Bran's storyline because, like Sansa, he is sort of caught up with the books, almost kind of, sort of. And I think he has based on what I know is coming, I think he has so much potential. So I would say, sure, but don't write it off because there are some things to watch with that storyline.
Now, my understanding from the rumors that I've heard is that actually there will not be any Bran in the season 5.
Oh,
that storyline will be
shunted
aside.
Interesting.
like dust on the floor or something like that, swept aside.
Well, it's funny because like at the end of season 4, I did not think it was the most boring storyline, but when they got to the end with those characters, with Bran and Jojen and Mira leading them, it went way into fantasy world, and obviously it's a fantastic show, but it like there were ice zombies popping up, and we've seen ice zombies before.
Drama.
But it was very, it was almost...
It was the show up till now has been very restrained in its fantasy elements.
Exactly.
While they were there, and we all knew they were there, they definitely like playing the, is it magic, or is it just good psychology, con men game kind of thing?
Which is sort of how the book is, too.
Yeah.
But visually it's harder to, I think, swallow.
And right out and out with the end of Bran's storyline that seemed to be, okay, we're going into full-fledged, you have magic powers.
Right, and the elves that pop up shooting fireballs. I mean, it was straight up
magic children,
D&D
That would hurt me.
moment. And I was not a fan of that, how the scene was shot.
I could hear Yes and Jethro Tull in the background of that.
But yeah, it became a little overt at that point, and that was less interesting. But I wouldn't mind him not being in this season.
Yeah, I wouldn't cry about it.
Save that up for a big dramatic reveal.
But no
down the
Hodor.
line. Oh, no Hodor.
No, I
That'll
do
be
love
sad.
Hodor.
That will be sad.
Maybe they'll slip a reference in.
We'll miss Hodor.
Someone will just mutter it under their breath.
Well, let's take a minute here, if we can, and we're going to play a little snippet of one of the trailers from the show. This is, I think, the latest trailer that's going up, that's gone up, and I'm just going to play you the audio. You can find it on YouTube if you want to, but it's 30 seconds.
He said derisively.
So just listen to this for 1 second.
Lannister, Baratheon, Stark, Tyrell. They're all just spokes on a wheel. This one's on top, then that one's on top, and on it spins, crushing those on the ground. I'm not going to stop the wheel. I'm going to break the wheel.
Stannis Baratheon has an army at Castle Black. He means to take the north.
This is the time, and I will risk everything. Winter is coming. We know what's coming with it.
We can learn to live with the wildlings. Or we can add them to the army of the dead.
You are the few. We are the many.
We serve the gods, and the gods demand justice.
Clean this city out. So the rats have nowhere left to hide.
I am a queen, not a butcher.
All rulers are either butchers or meat.
Okay, we're back. So that was the little second trailer, I believe, for season 5 of Game of Thrones. And in there, the big thing, of course, was Daenerys talking about spokes on a wheel and how she wants to be the wheel smasher,
Not a fan
or
of
wheel
wheels.
breaker, which would be a good song by Heart, I think. Yeah.
Okay.
But so what do you make of that little speech she has and her having read the books, her determination to shake things up?
Yeah, well, I mean, Dany definitely always talks a good game. What I liked about season 4 was she was eventually, finally running into roadblocks, because she's been one of the most interesting characters in the series, definitely. But she's also been super successful. She sets her mind to a thing and then accomplishes it, and she's had, setbacks, but she's shows up imperial and with dragons and with an ever-growing army and people who would love her, and it smacks a little sometimes of this white lady's gonna save the world of pseudo Asia,
Thank you
And
for freeing us when we
yeah,
really
save
super asked
save
for
us
that.
from slavery,
Somewhat
white
darkly
lady.
skinned people.
Yeah,
Right.
and like the whitest of white ladies. So that the fact that she's, and I don't know if George Martin was planning any of this, but like the fact that, invading all these nations in this pseudo Middle East doesn't always go terribly well.
Cough, cough.
And I have no idea if that was intentional or just his typical deconstruction of heroic fantasy.
Sure.
But I like the fact that she's going to be facing a lot of more complicated questions, and the longer she stays in a place, the worse it gets for her.
So I agree with that, but also I find the longer she stays in a place, the more boring it is for all of us.
That's true.
So the speech is something that I don't remember in the books. It might have been there, but I super liked it, and I took it as maybe she's heading to Westeros a little quicker than planned, or why is she scheming this way? I don't know. So it's pretty exciting. I don't know. I hope it means that there's going to be a little more interaction between her storyline and everyone's in Westeros. But
Well, I get the
That would be
feeling
great.
that she and Tyrion might meet up, which I believe
Yeah.
is not in the books. That they're
Correct.
going to be working. And there's also another trailer scene where Varys is talking to Tyrion and basically suggesting that they need to throw their weight behind someone who's going to unite the kingdoms, and it's strongly hinted that may be Daenerys.
yeah.
But
Yeah, and that would be a very interesting turn of events.
Different from the books, but I think, again, and they make a lot of good choices, so I'm all right with that one.
And I think that's a big criticism in the books is Dany's story is so far removed from the rest of the world. So
Yeah, it's a little arduous to get through at times.
one thing I also noticed in the various trailers is a lot of guys in masks
Yeah.
running around.
yeah, and it looked like there was that was all taking place in the city. Was it Yunkai?
I remember, I think she's in Marine.
Interchangeable,
No.
vaguely Middle
Kinda
Eastern
the
city
same.
number 3.
Can't really tell them apart.
Yeah, and that's. I don't think this is much of a spoiler. She's not terribly popular with a large swath of the population in that city.
Right.
So there's some elements of rebellion, it seems, from the trailer, which is pretty cool.
You can see the statue, what's it called? Harpy.
The Harpy, yes.
Being torn down, so yeah, you can definitely catch some of that.
I am, speaking of Dany and her desert adventures, I am super, super excited for the introduction of more of the Martell
Oh my goodness.
faction.
I'm so excited for that.
I think that, what was his name from last season?
Oberyn.
Oberyn, thank you. I think that Oberyn Martell
Viper.
was introduced in season 4 and instantly became nearly everyone's top 5 favorite character.
Meanwhile, everyone who read the books was like, okay.
I know,
guys.
heartbreaking. But I think that
I love
actor,
them so much.
Pedro Pascal,
Don't get too attached.
yeah, that'll teach us. Don't ever get too attached to these people. Pedro Pascal did an amazing
my
job in the
God.
course
Yeah.
of just 2-3 episodes,
Yeah.
making that character incredibly loved. And the fact that his faction is coming in really strong after just this taste of, hey, this guy's great, but he's gone. But now his family and his 7 daughters, all of whom are in the series, which is incredible,
Yes.
like all 7 of them. No one is being cut or condensed into multiple characters. And all of them are much like him, very passionate, very
Yeah.
capable, and women, which is really, really
Yeah.
great because
and furthering
there's-
the point, George R. R. Martin really knows how to write women with agency, and I think that whole family is such a good example of that.
yeah, so
they
it would
have
be
a lot
great to
going
see more of that in the show. It's always good, especially in medieval sort of dramas where female
so
agency
used to
is
that.
very often taken for granted.
Right?
Yeah, or non-existent.
Yeah.
So it's nice to, that is one of the most striking things certainly about the show from my perspective.
Yeah, and let's not forget that the little Lannister princess is still over there with the
Yeah.
Martells.
Yeah, the politics with
Oh, Cersei's...
Oh yeah,
Cersei's daughter is, what's the polite word for hostage? She's
Ward.
Yeah, she's the
She's
ward
the
of
ward.
of the Martells, and the
Yeah.
Martells hate the Tyrells, who
Yes.
are the other big backers of the Lannisters. So that all could fall apart,
Mm-hmm.
and probably will, because it's Game of Thrones, and nobody gets along.
Well, on that note, I think we have to wrap it up for this first debut episode. I'd like to thank Sean and Rebecca for joining me here to talk about all things GOT.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah.
This has been the reigns of Podcastamere. If you're a fan of Game of Thrones, if you like the show, you have something to say, you disagree with everything we've said so far, let us know. Drop a line in the comments.
Bran.
Everyone loves Bran. Well, it's good for you, fiber. You can find this podcast on iTunes and on SoundCloud if you look for PennLive News Podcasts. Again, I'm Chris Mautner, and wish you well.
Da 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 da.